I'm delighted by the extent of the popular outcry in Canada around the Emergency Measures Act, and I'm delighted, too, that the Prime Minister, for whatever reason, decided to declare the emergency over. I think the popular outcry against the emergency measures probably had something to do with his ending it. But I would caution you that, unfortunately, the Emergency Measures Act was popular among many Canadians, particularly those Canadians who would probably be inclined to vote for what I call the consolidated left in Canada, the Liberals, the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, and the Greens. There is a group in politics around the world, on both the right and the left, who believes that the end justifies the means, that don't care so much about the rule of law or normal legal processes. And I think that's unfortunate. What I personally object to in Canada was the fact that there are agreed upon recourses for people who believe that other people are acting illegally, that is to say, the Canadian courts. And traditionally in Canada, the Prime Minister would have availed himself of the court to have the court to declare the unlawful assemblage on public thoroughfares and the blockage of the border illegal. And having obtained that ruling, if he did, he could then ask law enforcement to enforce the order. What he did was very different. He chose to bypass the courts, and for that matter, largely bypass the legislature, and act by executive decree, both in terms of declaring the occupation illegal and also in terms of ending it, but in a much more draconian sense, by attaching financial assets to those who had given support to an action that was, at least at the time that they had given support to it, not illegal. The idea that he used the power of the federal government to use the financial service system to stifle dissent, freedom of speech, from a political rather than a legal point of view is horrifying. Now, predictably, there was outrage and confusion about this around the world. It should be noted that his order, at least as it was stated, applied to those who had supported the truckers' convoy. And I got 500 emails from Americans saying, "Are my Canadian assets safe?" Well, pursuant to the order, if you weren't among the people who supported the trucker, the answer in that context was yes. Looking further down the road, of course, this draconian adventure into private property rights is something that people need to be concerned about, not just in Canada, but around the world. People asked me, too, because of my large shareholdings in Sprott, whether the Canadian government was in a position to gather those assets. And I want to say that while I'm horrified about the long-term implications of the Prime Minister's act, the actions that he took would not have applied to Sprott assets. First of all, the individual shareholders don't technically own the assets in the vault at the Royal Canadian Mint. They're owned by the trust. And what the Prime Minister would had to have done is to affect his scheme extraterritorially, which is to say seize the shareholdings of those people who held shares in the Sprott Physical Trust through the facilities of the New York Stock Exchange Clearing Corporation. That seems to me to be a stretch too far. That isn't to say that people shouldn't be concerned about this type of imperial overreach by the government of Canada. And it also means, I think, that Canadian citizens should continue to put pressure on their members of parliament, irrespective of the political stripe of that member of parliament, to protect their private property rights. This government overreach, where they can stifle ideologically inconvenient dissent, political freedom of speech, by attaching people's insurance policies, by attaching their bank accounts, by attaching their brokerage accounts, is absolutely draconian and unwarranted and hasn't occurred in Canadian history, even in times of war. That isn't to say that there aren't some shameful episodes in the history of the United States and Canada in times of war with regards to individual liberty. One might look at the internment of Japanese Americans and Japanese Canadians as other examples of government overreach. But this type of overreach in times of peace is, at least in terms of my memory, without parallel, and it needs to be resisted. I can only say, as a side note, Dunnigan, I wish Battle Bank was up and had its charter with Canadian dollar-denominated accounts so that Canadians could open Canadian dollar accounts in the United States. We probably would have raised $1 billion in deposits, but too little too late, I guess. I'm certain that there was appeals by Canadian banks, but I don't think the exodus was sufficient that in and of itself would have caused a change in policy. The policy was deeply unpopular among Canadians, many of whom, in good conscience, vote Liberal. And I think it was a convergence of factors that caused the political risks associated with the action to exceed the political rewards that might otherwise have accrued to the Prime Minister. At present, yes, I think it was an oversight on the Prime Minister's part. I don't think that he deliberately exempted bullion holders. I think it's such a small asset class relative to what he could otherwise steal that he didn't bother with it. And I suspect as they have time to review their techniques, if they decide to employ this again, that they'll address that oversight. For the time being, the asset class, which is to say bullion held by Canadians in independent storage, is such a small asset class that it wasn't worth his going after. I don't think it exhibited any goodwill on his part towards gold. I just think it was a simple mistake, one of many. I think not at all. I think the banks have more power than the vaults. So I think ultimately, if they correct that mistake, that the banks will have more recourse to public opinion and more recourse to political power than the independent storage community will. I am, in fact, buying more Russian stocks. I'll say that I'm doing it with trepidation for two reasons. One reason is economic, which is to say, if the Russians are thrown out of the SWIFT system, will the Russians have the ability to pay me my dividends, the dividends being an important part of the yield on Russian stocks? Similarly, will the British government delist the Russian stocks from the London Stock Exchange? And finally, will the U.S. government, through their own sanctions, forbade me from owning Russian stocks? So there's a lot of political risk. There's Russian risk, there's British risk, and there's U.S. risk. The second question is moral. Do I want to indirectly aid the Russian economy? This is not a political consideration. It's something that has bothered me for years about owning stocks in many jurisdictions, the U.S. among them. When I object, as I do, to the policies of the U.S. government, how do I feel about subsidizing the U.S. government by paying taxes on my dividends and capital gains to the U.S. government? Political risk and moral risk is where you find it. And I need to say that these are issues that I'm still grappling with. I believed before the incursion that the Russian stocks were the cheapest big natural resource stocks in the world, and they are now on a 50% off sale. I am taking advantage of that, knowing full well the risk. There is an investment case to be made for Russian stocks, and there is a speculative case to be made for Russian stocks. But viewers to this interview that don't have the courage of their convictions and don't have either the psychological or the fiscal resources to stand this risk should really get out of the way. If all of my Russian stocks went to zero, make no mistake, it would bother me psychologically, but it wouldn't change my decision as to what to have for breakfast. When I look at companies like Gazprom, if you set aside the moral objections to owning Gazprom, which I believe are real, this is a world-scale company that has, I'm not saying it's going to, but could be a 10-bagger in 5 years. The idea that you can buy what could be a 10-bagger with a 5% or 6% dividend is an unbelievable set of circumstances if you view it simply from an investment or a speculative lens.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information, and it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
Do you want to know one thing about crypto? I made over 3,000% in profit in a few weeks. Fact is, the traditional financial system, the traditional money system makes you poor, not rich. If you want to earn $500,000, $1 million, you have to wait until you're 50, 60, 70 in the traditional financial system, and you probably will still be broke. And you will be old. This is not a sexy combination, as you can imagine. But the question is, how can you start in crypto and make these profits? Where to invest? Where to start? My name is Gunnar and I'm from Germany, as you can hear, and things are a little bit different in Germany. More about that later on. Fact is, there are lots of different cryptocurrencies. It's a gigantic universe where beginners and professionals get easily lost. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are 7 key steps you need to follow to become successful in this market. You have to know them, and if you fail one of them, it's literally impossible to succeed in this market. Just an example, one of the key points is your exchange, and one of the biggest are, for example, Binance and Coinbase. These are trusted and well-established exchanges, but, and this is a big but, you won't find the super profitable coins on those exchanges. The unknown super profitable coins that get gigantic profits are not traded on those kind of exchanges. They are traded on much smaller insider platforms that are barely known. And I can tell you what those super secret exchanges are and why they are so profitable. And another super important thing are the right information sources. The point is, the internet is gigantic. There are hundreds and hundreds of YouTube channels, blogs, pages, and much more. And there are also market makers and influencers. For example, Elon Musk, he is not a crypto guy, but the moment he recommended Dogecoin, it went through the roof, to the moon, so to say. But why did he recommend it? Where did he hear it from? He didn't hear it from newspapers. And believe me, he is listening to someone. But you have to know who, and you have to react before he is reacting. This is really important. And these are only 2 of the 7 steps you have to follow in order to be successful in crypto. And if you want to know all of these steps in much more detail, and if you want to have a comprehensive checklist, here's what you should do. There is a link below this video. Click on this link and you will get the opportunity to subscribe to my channel. Click on the link and you will see a video where I explain the next steps. So see you soon. Click on the link now. I'll see you there.